It's Monday, February 2nd, 2009. I'm Tom Rankin, and I'm going to be speaking about the role of traditional architecture in the contemporary city. If you were to take a picture of just about any urban space in the city of Rome today, you would find a combination of 18th or 19th century palaces in various degrees of disrepair, discoloration, patina, showing their age. But you would also find shop displays with contemporary design, contemporary lighting, signage, and products. You would see on the streets high-tech vehicles, automobiles, scooters, bicycles. And you would see people dressed in the contemporary fashions of our day. So what is it about the architectural backdrop that we find so comforting when it is traditional, and for many uncomfortable when it is of the same modern design that we're used to in all of the other aspects of our life? Well, basically, I think it's because buildings are built to last, not to be renewed after a short time. So we expect them to be different from the changing fashions around us. It would be wrong environmentally and economically, and in the end also aesthetically, to tear down a building because it's out of style. On the other hand, if there's an urban void which could benefit from new architecture, I think it would be wrong to fill it with either a mimetic, false, historical piece of design, or with a stylish, expressive work too closely linked with this year's trends. Architecture should be more lasting, more responsible, and more fitting with its context than either art or fashion. If one can agree on this working hypothesis so far, the next question is what a more responsible architecture should look like. And this depends on the materials and skills available locally, which should end up producing an architecture which looks more local. It depends on the exposure to sun and the elements, which changes from site to site. It depends on the relationship between interior, exterior, desirable points of view, points of access. It also depends to some degree on things that are invisible. Historical traces which may no longer be extant, infrastructural support systems which our society, modern society, has tended to relegate to the sidelines, to hide in the walls and floors and ceilings, and many essential communication systems which are wireless today and yet have a profound effect on our buildings. Finally, the quality of the building depends on not just the first phase users, the client, if you will, but a number of stakeholders who may never enter a building and yet depend on the health and quality of the environment, present and future, that is affected by the building. I believe in the need for greater environmental responsiveness by the building industry, in the desirability of dense, complex, mixed-use urban concentrations, free from automobiles, free from functional zoning, and in the value of historical complexity in providing a context for new projects. I also agree with traditionalists that signature architecture is almost always detrimental to cities, to the environment, and to the profession. I might find agreement with traditionalists on the fact that new architecture can use technology appropriately. It can integrate itself within existing fabric without mimicking it. It can improve the quality of life for its users. Now, it's easy to find successful examples of historical architecture, and it's also easy to find failed modern examples. But far more challenging to find successful examples of responsible modern design. In Rome, if we go back to the beginning of the 20th century, the garden cities like Garbatella, Monte Sacro, Pineto, one would argue that we're not talking about a modernist language, and yet few would question the success of those neighborhoods. As we move into the 1920s and 30s, the fascist era borgate, the new cities outside of Rome, also, despite their infamous reputation, which is often tied more to the politics than to the actual, well, to the politics and the poverty of the residents than to the actual urban design, one finds some architectural quality which should not be underestimated. After the Second World War, I would argue that there continued to be a number of successful examples of interventions within historical fabric. Lesser known architects such as Paniconi Pediconi, Lucchicenti in Monaco, Mario De Renzi, and some of the projects by better known architects such as Luigi Moretti, Mario Ridolfi, and Adalberto Libera provide just a few examples of what I would point to as successful modernist design, proving that it's not necessary to use historical styles to produce sensitive urban architecture, sensitive both to the city and its cultural context and to the natural context, the environment. This will be the subject of some future discussions, specific examples where we'll go out to see and reevaluate some of the examples of later 20th century design in Rome. Thanks very much for joining me.